Perfect. So that takes us to after college.
Yeah.
And we have this lovely new product in front of us
Yeah.
called New Brew, a euphoric seltzer. It is alcohol and cannabis free.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about your journey with New Brew from the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the journey really starts back in childhood, like in the years that we were just talking about. And it really, the New Brew product and the idea for it stems out of my own personal journey with alcohol and then away from alcohol. I started to drink at a pretty young age. At the time it felt like just a party thing. Like I like to be social and drink alcohol, but that continued through high school, college, and into early adulthood. And it became more of a destructive force in my life than anything. Like after a while, when I was in my late 20s and early 30s, and certainly once I fell in love and got married, the kind of...
Shout out to Sim.
Yeah, shout out to Simmy, the best wife in the world, truly. And she stuck with me during like the dark times where I was drinking a lot. And, for me, like, yes, alcohol was deteriorating my health, as it does for anyone who's abusing alcohol. But I think it was more like the social harm. Like I was not connected to myself. I was disconnecting further and further the more I was drinking. It may have seemed from the outside like I was just this like beast of a party animal, which I was in some ways, but really I was numbing myself. Like I have dealt with treatment-resistant depression, like since I can remember. And I was going to therapy and doing this and that, but really I was like self-medicating with alcohol. And I didn't view it that way at the time, but I was trying to find some kind of escape. Like, so I would do so by going out and getting wasted, and developing this whole kind of persona to not have to cope with what was really going on inside of me. And not everyone has that relationship with alcohol, right? But a lot of people do, I think. Like a lot of people are looking for an escape of sorts.
More people than would admit.
Definitely.
I certainly believe that,
yeah,
for sure.
It's a bit of an epidemic in our culture, and I think around the world, like, and probably has been for a very long time. But yeah, I didn't have that sort of insight into it, and then I could feel like that it was exacerbating the pain that I was feeling, like the loneliness, the self-doubt, like all of the sort of symptoms of depression were worsening, and it was the cyclical thing of like getting really drunk and feeling like a real high and then hitting a lower low than the last time and then going back and doing it again. And it was only when I fell in love with Simi and started seeing that pain reflected in the person that I love that I felt like, oh shit, like I'm going to have to do something about this. This is not sustainable. Before that, it was like, I'm going to send a few apology texts, sweep this one under the rug. We're going to move on to the next one. And really, I don't think I loved myself enough to make that kind of big life change. I had to see the pain, being reflected in somebody who I really loved, in order to do something about it. So I think that, falling in love saved my life. Like in a lot of ways, I really think that's how it went down for me. So it was just a couple years ago, actually almost exactly 2 years ago, that this all kind of came to a head. Made the decision to leave alcohol behind entirely, which was in some ways really difficult, but also a really easy choice because it was clear I either get to be with the woman I love or I get to keep drinking. And she made that clear for me, which is the greatest gift anyone could have ever given me. So I made that choice, and it was really, honestly, through a lot of the work that I did with psychedelics that I was able to get sober or leave alcohol behind at least and stay alcohol free.
What are some examples of that?
Yeah. So I would say I've had like a long-term fascination with psychedelics. Like I would experiment with mushrooms, with psilocybin, and with LSD in college and in the years after. And like, that was in recreational settings, right? Like we were like trying to have fun, and man, we had fun. But even in those moments, I could see that I was tapping into something, a higher power of sorts, like something cosmic, something mystical, and that I was like viewing myself in a totally different light and maybe grappling with some of the questions that I avoid day in and day out. So I had this like inkling that there was something more there. And then a couple of years ago when I had, I had been in therapy for 2 decades. I'd been cycled on and off of different antidepressants that whole time. None of it did anything. Like, that's what I mean by treatment resistant depression. Like, that whole therapeutic model that is fed to you by the American healthcare system of like, go to therapy once a week and take this pill every day, was failing me, as it does a lot of people. So I was looking for alternatives, and it was starting to come into the news around that time that like psychedelics were having this renaissance, right? Like, people were beginning to look at them as serious therapeutic modalities, which they hadn't since the 50s, since all of this stigma built around them, and they were, criminalized in the United States, and all the research ended. So I got real curious about that as someone who had like tapped into that in moments already. And the first form of that therapy that I sought out was ketamine therapy. And I did that here in LA, and it completely changed my life. It transformed me. I went in for, their standard protocol where I did a couple sessions a week for a month, and I gained an entire new perspective on myself.
It's a licensed therapist and all that.
Oh, my insurance paid for this.
Yeah.
Like, truly, like, this is widely available. And yeah, it helped me create new neural pathways, which is like a fancy way of saying it helped me think in new ways, right? Like, it helped me view things from a new perspective. And in particular, my drinking, like the way that my drinking was impacting myself, my loved ones, how it was preventing me from getting where I wanted to be. And so it just became clear, like, it was obvious already, probably to the people around me, but I couldn't see it that way. It's really hard to like describe this in words. It's like ineffable, right? There was a whole new feeling, a whole new experience that came to light through that, the ketamine therapy that I did. And that was the first like major step towards me being able to wrap my head around the idea of living an alcohol-free life. And I would say that was like the core experience, but I also was pursuing other forms of psychedelic therapy. I've done ayahuasca retreats, which have been absolutely transformative for me as well. I was able to cycle off of antidepressants and begin using psilocybin microdoses, which I still do on a regular basis now, and really tapping into the power of Mother Nature. Like, I was getting off of synthetic medications that were prescribed to me and beginning to heal myself using Mother Nature's tools. And it's a long story, right? But like, this is all part of the background of New Brew. When I quit drinking alcohol, I gave myself like 4 or 5 months where I was entirely abstinent. I didn't drink caffeine, nothing. Like, there was no use of anything. I completely cleansed my system, and I think I found my baseline. And to anyone who is trying to get sober, I would recommend doing that. Like, I don't think that New Brew, for example, or Cannabis, or even psilocybin are a great way to get off of a drug like alcohol. Like, I think total abstinence is the best way to do it in the short term. So once I found comfort in my baseline and found like peace in alcohol-free living, I started to look to alternatives, right? My goal was not to become an entirely sober person who like doesn't even drink coffee. It was to get alcohol out of my life, right? And to not be relying on something and have a crutch like that. So it was around that time that I was traveling with my wife and stumbled into a kava bar. And I was served this mixture of 2 plants that I was not familiar with. One was kava root and the other was kratom leaf. So I was served this tea and a coconut shell and drank this mixture, and I just felt like incredible. It was this mind-blowing experience where I felt open-hearted, I felt grounded, I felt really empathetic and connected to myself and connected to others. I felt social and talkative, but I didn't feel inebriated. Like, I didn't feel impaired in any way. In fact, I went and got out a great workout in right after, like an amazing workout, better than I would have otherwise. I walked around the whole town, like I didn't feel drowsy. I wasn't sloppy. I didn't get hungover after. So my mind was blown. I was like, how have I never heard of these plants? Brought them back home to LA and started to experiment with them and figure out like the right ratio of the two. And that was like the beginnings of the formulation process for New Brew.
That's pretty dang awesome.
Yeah.
The journey that you've been on, and then also to come to a space that, you know, when you're in this sober state, you found something that made you feel so connected and so, you know, peaceful, it sounds like, more than anything. And then you say it here, right? This is a euphoric seltzer, right?
Yeah,
it is. Kind of like, give us a little context on what you mean by euphoric seltzer in this.
Yeah. I mean, it speaks for itself. If you drink it, you feel euphoric. Like you feel a wave of euphoria. New Brew has tangible, real effects. You know, that was the other driving force behind this. In those months after I quit drinking, I experimented with a lot of the non-alc, like NA drinks that have like formed this whole new category, right, at the grocery store or at the liquor store. Yeah. And what I found was like a lot of very beautifully branded products, a lot of products that did a really good job of mimicking the look or the feel or the taste of alcohol, which does serve one function, right? But I found nothing that replaced the effects of alcohol in any way, right? Like the CBD, adaptogenic, nootropic beverages out there, I take supplements like adaptogens, right? But those are not psychoactive. Those don't have any real effect. They don't create an experience. And if I'm in a social setting and I'm participating in the ceremony of drinking, I think a core part of that is shifting your consciousness in some way. So I couldn't find that at all in that market. And so I was already, when it came to the time where I discovered these two plants on vacation with Simi, I was already kind of looking for that, right? And I realized immediately upon drinking this mixture that I had found what I was looking for. Something that could kind of disrupt the NA drink market as it was. And that's what New Brew was doing, like real quick.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to drop a like if you enjoyed the video.
And subscribe and hit the bell for a whole lot more to come.